What's up, guys? Gabe the Great back here again for another video today. Thank you so much for everybody who's been watching my videos. The video that I recorded yesterday is still uploading. So these will probably be uploaded like back to back to each other. But today what I wanted to talk about was death. So this first video, I'm going to talk about death and how it impacts us and how it's the fear of death is irrational. And then in tomorrow's video, I may record it today, but upload it tomorrow. I'm going to talk about suicide. Okay. I'm not recording these videos to be monetized. I'm recording them for you guys just because I think it's helpful. So I don't really care if it gets demonetized. If it gets taken down, I'll change my language, to whatever the algorithm needs. But yeah, so this first video, I'm going to talk about how the fear of death is irrational. And then tomorrow, we'll talk about suicide and those type of thoughts and sort of how we ground all that in reality too. Okay, but let's get straight into it. Today, we're talking about how the fear of death is irrational. And it's very simple, guys. Name one person in human history who did not die. Everybody dies. Being afraid of death is like being afraid of breathing. It's going to happen. It's going to happen. You are going to die. There's nothing you can do to stop it. And today we're going to talk about why our egocentric world has made us so afraid of death. For most of human history, people weren't afraid of death. And due to a lot of things, we're not going to get into the history of it, but a big influence on the West is not just the church, but capitalism itself and this economic system. And America, the cult of America, has really made a lot of us afraid of death in a very irrational way, which is why we're putting up with so much corruption right now in the United States of America. It is December 8th, 2025. And we are still recording videos of ICE agents kidnapping people off the streets. That's ridiculous. When I read about how like white people used to go to like lynchings, you read about that and you go, man, that's so barbaric. How could they do that? And then you start to realize that was culture. And that's just what people did. And it's like today, people will watch. People would literally stand by. Where I think in psychology we call it the bystander effect. People will stand by and watch ICE agents do the most horrific things. And you read about the Americans of the past, whether it was the civil rights or women's suffrage or the child labor rights or the just regular labor rights, whatever it was, slavery, Jim Crow, like. Men and women were willing to risk their lives. Men and women were willing to stand up to the government, even if that meant paying the ultimate price. And we don't have that in America. This is not an issue of communism, socialism, racism, white supremacy. These are all excuses that we give ourselves for not doing what we need to do and saying what we need to say. I say it all the time. The people have this fear of something that is going to happen, or that their life is not going to accumulate what it needs to accumulate, and that they're going to waste their life by the time they get to death, that we're not risking anything. We have more technology, more people, we're better educated, we have more weapons than any other resistance people in the past. And we, the Americans in 2025, are giving a blueprint of how you can literally be the most powerful force on the face of the earth. The American population. You can be the most powerful force on the face of the earth. But if I can get you to fear, if I can get you afraid, you will not act. There is no reason we should be going through what we're going through, but a lot of it has to do with the fear of death. So we'll be in my manifesto, page 83, the death section. Like I said, today we'll go over how the fear of death is irrational, and then tomorrow we'll talk about suicide, okay? So death. You were born into a world that promised you nothing but guaranteed you one thing: you will die. Before you knew your name, the clock started ticking, and yet you lived your whole life as if that ticking wasn't real, as if death was something that happens to other people, as if your time here is unlimited. But here's the truth. Death is the most honest thing the universe has ever given you. Death strips away every illusion. It cares nothing for status, money, politics, or gender. Death does not flatter you. Death does not take bribes. Death is the only judge no one can escape. And that's why death is so terrifying to people who live in ego, because ego cannot survive it. Ego wants to write the ending, but death writes its own, and it doesn't ask for your permission. In a society ruled by narcissists, death is the enemy because they build everything to deny it. The Botox, the legacy portfolios, the over-engineered mythologies of heaven and hell. Death is not the enemy. It is the mirror. It reflects the one question you can't lie your way out of. Did you live? Not did you survive? Not did you play the game? Not did you perform? But did you live? As I said, the fear of death is irrational. And only in such an egocentric society, and only in an egocentric world where everybody is trying to collapse all of reality in on themselves, does the fear of death even make sense. Because with death, it's honest. Like I think about Donald Trump and these guys. I think about Peter Thiel and these guys. I think about Elon Musk and these guys. What do these guys think is going to happen when they die? Do these guys think that we're just going to worship them forever? No. And I think honestly they know they're the bad guys. They know they're the criminals. But because they don't live for the rest of us, they live only for selves. They live only for their own ego, their own personal version of reality. They want to bend everything else to that. They try to hold infinity in one lifetime and get more and more power, more. Like I tell people all the time, your fear of the surveillance state is irrational. Because one, if they was good at it, I wouldn't even be able to make this video. My phone would malfunction. If they were actually good at their surveillance states, you would not be able to say it. You would not even be able to know what their surveillance states was. A lot of our fear, the things that we fear about this administration or about this time period in American history, it's irrational. And it all comes from this fear of ego, your ego dying. Because that's the one thing ego can't deny. I think so often we look at ego as a negative thing. And I don't think ego is inherently negative. I explained in the self section that the first thing the self does is tell a story. And the first thing it tells a story is about itself, right? We all are ego driven. I'm driven by my own legacy. I'm driven by my own story. You're driven by your own story. So ego isn't inherently negative. Ego isn't inherently a bad thing. But what we do know about reality is anything to excess is too much. Anything to excess is bad for a single conscious being. So too much ego is bad. Too much money is bad. Too much power is bad. It's not good. It's not healthy. And when a society is built on this infinite growth, you just get more and more money, more power, more happiness, more pleasure, more. Just all of ego. Of course, death. Of course, death feels afraid. And just because you're not a billionaire, just because you're not a millionaire, do not be so arrogant enough to think that this doesn't apply to you. All right, I'm back. Kid is here. I don't know if you guys can see her, but she's in the background somewhere. But yeah, so we're talking about how ego is what really is afraid of death, right? Because ego is your personal version of reality. Okay, and we talked about yesterday or the day before how we are the multiverse, right? We're living in a multiverse right now. There is no such thing as objectivity. Objectivity is what happens when a bunch of subjective people agree on something, okay? And what ego does is it tries to make your subjective experience the objective experience of every other ego. And so it forces all other egos to submit to itself. And so because of that, it feels like death is the end of everything, but it's not, right? And so it's one of these things where what death does, though, is it forces ego to answer a question. And it forces you to answer the question of, did you live? Did you live? Did you, what it means to be you, what it means to be yourself, did you live? And as we talked about, or as I talk about in my manifesto, reality is made up of self, society, and the unknown. And the race to get to the top of an egocentric society is very unfulfilling. And the reason why it's unfulfilling is because if your meaning doesn't extend beyond you, and if you're not navigating the unknown as a manifestation of universal consciousness, as a piece of the universe getting to know itself, you're not experiencing life. And so what death does, death forces you to go, okay, did you live? You're going to get to the end and you got to ask yourself, like, did you live? Right? Not did you perform, not did you play the game, not did you go to work, not were you a good person, not did you live? See, everybody has life, but not everybody's living. Okay? See, some people think death is what makes life meaningless. But it's the opposite. Death is what forces meaning. If you are immortal, you delay everything. You waste centuries. You never wake up. But death makes time sacred. It makes every breath sacred. It makes truth urgent. Death is not the villain. Death is the fire, the catalyst, the hand that breaks the hourglass and demands you choose. Will you sleepwalk to the end, or will you make your life echo into eternity? But here's the secret. Death cannot kill what is fully alive. The Overman knows this. This is why he doesn't fear the end. He's already becoming part of something bigger. He's already aligned himself with universal consciousness. He's built a legacy not out of ego, but out of faith. When he dies, he doesn't vanish, he multiplies. But the narcissist, he dies every day, desperate for attention, hollow inside, chasing immortality through followers and fame. And when the body fails, there's nothing left of him, just noise, just vanity, or just vanity. So, if you want to defeat death, stop running from it. Face it. Let it shape your values. Let it humble your ego. Let it remind you that your time is limited, but your impact doesn't have to be. You were never meant to live forever. You are meant to live fully. And when you do, death isn't a thief. It's a release, a handoff, a return to the infinite. So go live. And when your time comes, die like someone who was never afraid to be fully alive. You good, baby girl?
Mommy, how about when dead?
Sure. You can interrupt me if you need to, okay?
I need to?
Yep, just say excuse me, okay?
Okay.
All right.
Mommy.
Love you too. So, going back to where we were. You know, I did this video on my birthday this past year, and this is going to sound bold, but I figured out eternal life. I figured out how you have eternal life. And it is the antithesis of what the ego wants. See, the ego wants to contain infinity in this life. And the ego wants you to accumulate. But the way that you really have eternal life is by making your life matter outside of yourself. See, because once you end, right, you are the universe getting to know itself. We explain this. The only way consciousness can get to know itself is to divide itself. This is why diversity is the default of the universe. Because it's only through contrast, it's only through comparison can we really know something. By describing what something is not, do we know what it is, right? Or by describing what it does, can we know what it is? And so consciousness has split itself up into millions and billions and different of conscious experiences through humanity. And through humanity, it gets to know itself. But who are the selves who live for eternity? Only the selves who are useful to the future. These are the only people who are going to live forever. These are the only people who are going to have eternal life. It doesn't matter how much money you get. You're not going to have eternal life. Somebody's going to make more money than Elon Musk someday. Or Elon Musk will forever be remembered as the one you don't want to be like, because there's no reason to have that amount of money. Nobody is going to outlive humanity. Humanity will continue on. You will not, but humanity will. And if your life is not useful to humanity, humanity will leave you in death. And so the reason why we talk about Jesus Christ, the reason why we talk about Plato, the reason why we talk about Socrates, the reason why we talk about MLK, the founding fathers, is because their lives, what they did in their life, made impact for us today. And I'm not saying you got to go down as Jesus or Socrates or any of these guys. But what I'm trying to do is put things into perspective. Is that chasing infinity, chasing ego, it doesn't make sense. What makes more sense is by making your life mean something. Making your life mean something, first, obviously to yourself, but also to your surrounding, to your community, right? And dancing with the greater unknown. See, when you're chasing ego, when you're trying to accumulate to make yourself big in the eyes of other people. You're trying to be big in the eyes of other people, right? You're forgetting that if you take up so much room, right? We all have to share this reality with each other. But if you take up so much room, it prevents other people from actually living. And so when you go, everybody's happy you're gone, right? But at the end of the day, it doesn't necessarily matter what legacy you leave for millions of people and billions of people. The thing is, death is coming. But death is what makes things mean something. Because if we were just to live forever, right? This is what these guys are they're trying to live forever. But you don't live forever by actually living forever. You don't achieve eternal life by actually having eternal life. You achieve eternal life by making your limited life matter eternally. That's how you have eternal life. Because you can, the death is what forces meaning. Because if you could live forever, nothing would mean anything. But it's the fact that you can only love for a certain amount of time. You can only feel for a certain amount of time. You can only experience a certain amount of time. You can only do things for a certain amount of time. And isn't it true, as we get older, we get nostalgic about the past? We get nostalgic about high school. We get nostalgic about our 20s, our early 30s, right? And as we get older, we understand, wow, life is precious. I didn't understand how precious it was back then. And that's part of the journey. I think everybody goes through that to some effect. But the point being is that as we approach the end of life, that is what gives meaning to the rest of life. And so fearing death, being afraid that one day you might die, that's not important. What is important is, how are you living? How are you living? And I tell people all the time, how you lived is going to be seen through these cameras. That's why it matters now more than ever to stand for truth, because the future will now see you. Your great-grandchildren will be able to go back and find videos of you. They will be able to hear about you. So it doesn't matter if the words that I say doesn't resonate with my generation. These cameras give us a portal to the future. But even these cameras, it matters what you do on these cameras. If you were trying to become a celebrity in a dying empire, the future has no use for you. If you were just trying to become the best salesman or make the most money, there's been plenty of people who's tried to make money. The future doesn't care about you. But if you use these cameras to impact people, to give them a message of liberation, to show them how to stand up for truth, how to stand up for justice, guess what? Now your life means something. Meaning is extending beyond you. Meaning is extending beyond yourself. It's why I tell people, we cannot be afraid of the surveillance state. Because it's not just that the government is watching, the future is watching us. And their opinion of us matters more than the government. What they learn from this time period matters more than what the government could use against us. You're afraid of something that is going to happen. You're going to die. And when you're dealing with ego-driven people, the more you try to live, the more that they try to consume you, because they want to make everybody's subjective reality all about them. Okay? Let's here we go. Let's go down to here. We don't know what will happen after we die. And that's the point. Whatever the afterlife is already happening. People have been dying for millennia, and whatever lies beyond the veil isn't waiting for us. It already is. We may not have the tools to grasp it, but that doesn't mean it isn't there. What we call afterlife is simply a word we've given to the unknowable transition from one state of being to the other. Every one of us has a birth date, a day we came a distinct self, a conscious being shaped by the body, the environment, and the infinite. But whatever comes after we die likely resembles whatever came before we were born. The you that exists now is the only you've ever known. So whatever you return to, whether silence or infinity, was always there before. The fear of death is an ego problem. It is a refusal to accept that you are not the center of the universe, just the center of your own narrative. Fear of the afterlife is just another way the ego tries to cling to performance. Fire is physical. Your body is not eternal, and fear-based stories like hell no longer serve us. These were myths of the ancient people who lacked the information we have now, and yet they still imagine. They still dare to create stories that make sense of the end. That was noble. We must do the same. The myths we inherited must evolve. The afterlife is not about judgment or punishment. It's about transition. Maybe the self dissolves. Maybe consciousness returns to its source. Maybe there is something. Maybe there is not. But this much is true. You are the meaning maker. You gave meaning to the afterlife. You gave meaning to God, and you must decide what the end means for you. When the body falls away, when the self has no more access to the environment, what remains? We don't know, and we don't have to. But what we can do is stop pretending that fear belongs at the center of the unknown. Let the myths of tomorrow speak of courage, not shame. Wonder, not fear. Evolution, not control, because the afterlife is not a place you go. It is the final invitation to return to what you've always been. A fragment of infinity, a sliver of the unknowable heading home. So maybe the question is no longer, what happens after I die? Maybe that's the wrong question. Maybe the better question is, will I be happy with how I live? Or maybe it's not a question at all. Maybe it's a goal. Maybe it's a vow. When I die, I want to be able to say I was satisfied with what happened. I may not know what comes next, but I know what I chose to become. I know what I stood for, and I know who I loved. I know what I tried to create. I know how I evolved, and that's enough. Let the afterlife remain unknown. Let it stay sacred, but let the life before it be full, and let it be yours. 1 second. You good, Davy? Sure, baby. I remember one time, I was thinking about death one time, right? And it never, somebody put it some way. I forget how they put it, but we were talking about the afterlife, and they said, well, what about the before life? What happened before we were born, right? And I talk about this in the manifesto, how all of us are infinity actualized, right? The human life feels infinite. Why? Because we have no knowledge of our beginning. If I were to ask you about, hey, the beginning of your life, you would not be able to recall it. At best, you would be able to tell me stories of other human beings telling you about the beginning of your life. You can't tell me about the womb, and you can't tell me about your first few days here on earth. And you also can't tell me about the end of your life. And so in a very real way, the human experience feels infinite because it feels like I didn't have a beginning. I just popped into reality. I don't remember the beginning. And there was nothing before me. As far as I know, everything I know before me called history is what I've learned from other humans. And I don't know what happens after me, nor do I know my end, so it feels infinite. But what that means is that even though it feels infinite, I do know that there was a beginning and an end. And so I do know that there's been billions and trillions of beginnings and ends. And I'm just like them. And the ego wants you to believe that you're different. You're better than them. And I'm not saying that each of us doesn't have unique talent, skills, and ability. I don't know anybody else talking like this the way I'm talking. I don't know anybody else putting together a map of reality like I am right now. I don't know anybody else. So in that way, I'm different. I'm still human. I still will have a beginning. I still will have an end. And the only thing that makes all that mean something is that in between that beginning and that end, man, I gotta do what I'm here to do. I'm not telling you gotta be Gabe the Great. But what I am saying is that we are at a unique time in human history where the fear of death is keeping us from living. And it will be captured on video forever. People will be able to see how the Americans were afraid of life. I remember when I left the church, you guys know I used to be a pastor, I used to be a minister. And it just hit me. Hell doesn't make any sense. Fire's physical. We're not going to have a physical body. Who cares if I burn? And at the end of the day, why would I want to spend an eternity with a God who wants me to burn in hell? These myths don't work for us anymore. And so while people are deconstructing from Christianity and deconstructing from religion, we're not crafting new myths. We're not crafting new narratives. And the reason being is because the ego has us trapped in materialism. The ego has us trapped in being right, truth, the illusion of truth, right? Right after this section, we dive into truth, the illusion of truth. And we got to stop all this obsession of ego. We got to stop it because it's turning us into cowards. We're standing by while our evil regime takes the Constitution to its logical conclusion. Even Thomas Jefferson thought the Constitution should have been rewritten every 19 years. We're 250 years into that bullshit document. And it's a bullshit document. It's a bullshit document. It was always a bullshit document. Someone who looked like me cannot go to that document for freedom. Neither can women. Neither can disabled people. Neither can non-white men who don't own land. It's not possible. We're beyond that document. But the fear of the unknown, the fear of, oh no, what comes next? You think Nepal knew what came next? You think all these other countries who have revolted and rebelled against their corrupt governments, you think they knew what came next? It's not about about knowing what comes next. That's not what it's about. It's about knowing how you lived, how you stood up for what you stood up for. And right now, a lot of us, we're sitting down or we're standing up for something, but it's not what we profess to stand up for. So I want to encourage you guys, you live life to your full. Because again, maybe it's not a question. Maybe it's a goal. Maybe it's a vow. When I die, I want to be able to say I was satisfied with what I did. That's the true goal. Not to get eternal life in heaven. The true goal is that every moment of your life, you want to be able to satisfy, man, if I go today, I'm happy. I'm happy with how I live. I'm happy with what I stood for. I'm happy. Yes, the world may think I'm this. Yes, these people, but I know what I live for. And thank God for social media. Thank God for these cameras, because there's going to be a firsthand testimony of my life forever. And if I'm never recognized in this life for who I am, if I genuinely, I believe I'm better than everybody who y'all call elite. Elon Musk, Donald Trump, Peter Thiel, Jeff Bezos, Mark Zuckerberg. I think I'm better. I think I should be at the top of society. If these are the guys who are at the top, I should definitely be over them 100%. Maybe that's never realized in my lifetime. Cool. I don't got to worry about that. because I know that I'm happy with how I lived, and I know that there is a firsthand documented account of my life. We're holding eternal life in our hands. We have the ability to make our lives mean something for all of human history. And so it's not about if you die. It's not about when you die. It's not about how you die. It's happening. That's going to happen. You're going to die. Everybody does. Nobody has ever gotten out of a life alive. It's about how did you live? How did you live? And I want to encourage you guys to live more boldly, live more courageously, stand up for what you believe in. Okay? Tomorrow, we're going to go deeper into this. We're going to talk about suicide. And I'm going to help try to ground these things in reality and ground these things and help any of us who struggle with it. I've struggled with it in the past. Anybody who's struggling with it right now and anybody who may struggle with it in the future. I want to give you guys a perspective on death in the context of that. And hopefully it'll be encouraging. Okay. But love you guys. I'll talk to you tomorrow. Bye.